So this module is about stress and illness, and it does talk about mental disorders. So the module starts off talking about how stress can make you sick. And it's not a secret that stress doesn't make things better necessarily. But we also don't have to view stress like it's going to be like impending doom, because that's an unhealthy way of viewing stress. Psychoneuroimmunology is the study of how psychological, neurological, and the endocrine processes together affect our immune system and resulting health. There's different kinds of stressors. And when you type in the word stressor, it always highlights it as, it's spelled incorrectly, but it's an actual word in psychology. It's any event or strain that poses a challenge on the human. And transient stressors, also known as acute stress, they're temporary challenges, but they could be really big and really awful, like divorce, like a death in the family, like a natural disaster. Even though they're terrible, they're considered transient or temporary. So think of T for transient, T for temporary. Now, chronic stress is a stress that has a negative impact on the health. This is that silent killer they're always talking about. This is like living in an abusive relationship where the stress never goes away. Even though those big transient stressors could be just awful, you could turn the chapter of your life and it changes, and that's what heals, and that's what promotes health. Now, ACE, or adverse childhood experiences, and of course things like trauma, could influence long-term stress reactions. Listen, the psychology and your physiology, they're interconnected. So there is long-term physiological effects to stress. I thought it would be nice and funny that I would put in these soft and relaxing little pictures in between our slides, just so that we can relax as we're talking about something very stressful. So we're relaxing now. Relaxing, relaxing. Now, stressors are anything that could push our buttons. So it could be as serious as some kind of catastrophe, like, we live in Florida. Hurricanes could be catastrophic. I lived through a few. And significant life changes, having a loved one pass away in your family, it's so hard. Moving to a different place, starting all over again, getting divorced. Even happy transitions like graduating from high school and moving on to college, that can pose to be a stress because it's a life change, even though it's a fun, positive change. And don't ever forget daily hassles and social stresses. These are your to-do lists, all the stressors that you get from school. All of this could contribute to your stress level. Now, in the module, they also talk about different kinds of conflicts, right? You have the approach conflict, where you're having to choose between two, relatively positive experiences, two favorable things. Like, should I have pizza or should I have tacos? I shouldn't have both, but you know what? I bet you could invent a taco pizza or something. Now, avoidance is having to choose between two unfavorable things. Like, should I go to the doctor or should I go to tutoring? Both are horrible, but you got to do them. And so we're choosing between two unfavorable. But really, what life is about? Life is about double approach avoidance conflicts, where we're choosing between two things that have both positive and negative. Should I get married? Should I stay single? Both have positive and negative, but I have to make a decision. I can't have both. So in class, we took this little stress test just to see what kind of stress we are currently perceiving. And then this is the outcome after you take the test. Here are how, when you do the scores, follow the directions here. It'll give you the answers to your score. Are you really stressed out? I don't know. Okay, so Hans Selye came up with the GAS, And GAS doesn't just stand for the word gas. It means general adaptation syndrome. And there's three parts of the general adaptation syndrome. There's the alarm phase, the resistance phase, the exhaustion phase. And I want you to think of it as far as like your body getting you ready for the stressor. That's what the alarm phase is, getting you ready to meet the stress. The second part is the resistance phase. You look normal, like you look like it's a regular day, but you're really still suffering the stress and you're hiding it, you know, and this could be at a job or it could be at school or whatever. And the last phase is the exhaustion phase. Under these conditions, people are so stressed out they get sick. And this explains why during finals week, midterms week, you see kids in college going to the clinic more than you do during flu season. Why is that? It could be because they're so stressed out, they're lacking in sleep, you know, and their immune system kind of bottoms out and they get sick. So animals under those conditions die and we get sick. In this part of the module, they're talking about stress and your vulnerability to disease. And really, your immune system is like a surveillance system. When it's functioning properly, it keeps you healthy by destroying bacteria, viruses, and other invaders. Your age, nutrition, genetics influence your immune system in general. But if it's not functioning well, then it could, you know, go wrong in two different ways. Number one, it could overreact, attacking its own healthy tissue and cells. For example, lupus, allergies, multiple sclerosis, arthritis. Women are more susceptible than men to autoimmune diseases. A second way it could kind of go wrong is underreacting. The immune system may allow bacterial infections to flare, a dormant virus to erupt, or even cancer to multiply. Again, a very pretty chart. It's not for decoration. This is one you could study. And the overall picture it's giving you that stress doesn't cause illness. Stress doesn't cause cancer. Stress can't cause bacterial infections. However, it weakens your body's natural immune system, your natural defenses to fight them off. Stress and coronary heart disease. What to know here is what is coronary heart disease. It's the clogging of the vessels that nourish the heart muscles, and it's the leading cause of death in many developed countries. Now, they're talking about personality types here. Type A personality, type B personality. The one that's most susceptible to coronary heart disease are type A folks. Now, don't get me wrong. Type A folks are very much needed. We need you. You guys invent things. You guys start companies, businesses, what have you. You are heads of state. You're entrepreneurs. You do all these great things. We need type A people. However, what's bad about type A people is something called TAPB. It's type A behavior patterns. They work very hard, but they also might play really hard. They might take, for example, drugs that might keep them awake longer so they can get more done. They engage in risky behaviors, and that's why type A people are more prone to heart disease. Additionally, with their attitudes, type A people are not really happy about criticism. They work hard, but they want things done their way, on their terms, on their time. And type A people, that sense of urgency increases blood pressure and of course puts you more prone to, again, coronary heart disease. Now type B people, those are the chill and relax ones. They have less tendencies of having coronary heart disease because, again, they don't have the hypertensive blood pressure. They tend to take things a little bit easier. They don't have that stress and urgency to get things done their way or no way. Type B people are chill, relaxed people. They tend to be healthier. These are a few sad examples about how grief-related depression and stress hormones can contribute to death. And you have two examples here on both sides. The one on the left is Carrie Fisher. She died in 2016, and the next day her mom, Debbie Reynolds, died of a stroke. And over here on the right next to me, we have Irma Garcia. She was a teacher that was shot protecting her students during an attack. And just after that, her husband, just days later, died of a heart attack. Could it be that the stress levels were so great that it contributed to their heart event? Looks like it. One thing that I've learned after many years of teaching psychology and reading about stress and stress hormones and how it hurts your immunity. One thing I've also, picked up on, and this is according to research, not my personal opinion, pessimistic people tend to have that pessimistic lens about everything. And that contributes highly to coronary heart issues. It contributes highly to high blood pressure. So being optimistic and joyful actually has its health benefits. And guess what? You can control this, and you can start this right now. Like, seriously, you can start right now. I'm not going to be pessimistic. I'm going to be optimistic. And talk yourself into becoming more optimistic about every single daily thing that you do. And you might see an improvement in your health. One thing that could really raise your blood pressure is anger, and there are ways to manage your anger. Now, experts will offer some great suggestions. Here are the top 3 things you should do. If you're having anger issues yourself, the first thing you need to remember is to wait, right? This is going to reduce the physiological arousal of why you're angry in the first place. Number 2, find a healthy distraction. Instead of ruminating, right, which actually increases your blood pressure, how about try something else? Distraction, exercise, go to the gym, read, engage in your hobby. Find a hobby if you don't have one. Number 2, really important. And number 3, distance yourself. Move away mentally. This reduces rumination and anger. So when you're angry, take yourself out of the equation, focus on something else, distract yourself. I'm telling you, these are 3 really good suggestions that help anyone that struggles with anger. Coping with stress, we all have different ways of coping with our stress. Coping by definition is alleviating stress using emotional, cognitive, even behavioral methods. And, it's really great when you have a catharsis, something that you can kind of go to, your happy place, your hobby that makes you happy, and that helps you kind of calm and quell those stressful reactions. Do you remember Julian Rotter's internal versus external locus of control? Locus of control means location of your control. Is your control inside of you? Do you control your life? If you think so, you're an internal. If you think something else controls your life, like fate, like the universe, right? Something else, that's an external locus of control. And hands down, internals tend to be happier than externals. According to researchers, here are some suggestions to cope with stressors. Number 1, have an internal locus of control. Know that you can change things. I could decide it, right now. I could change my attitude. I could change my work ethic right now because I choose it right now. Number 2, practice self-control. The ability to control impulses, delay short-term gratification for greater long-term rewards. Practice self-control. Number 3, be optimistic. You can actually control this. Be optimistic. Optimistic people respond better to setbacks. They have better health. They manage conflict constructively. They relate better to people. And number 4, social support. Where are your friends? Go out with them. Go to a movie. Talk on the phone. Hang out on social media with them. FaceTime. FaceTime is a great thing. It promotes happiness, belongingness, health. It combats isolation. It calms us. It improves our sleep. It reduces our blood pressure. The list goes on and on. Really, try these 4 things to help cope with your stress. Positive psychology is the scientific study of human flourishing with the goals of promoting strength and virtues that foster well-being and resilience and positive emotion, and it helps an individual and communities to thrive. Subjective well-being means it's like a self-perceived happiness or satisfaction with life, used along with measures of objective well-being. For example, physical and economic indicators to evaluate people's quality of life. Now, one of my favorites is the feel-good, do-good phenomenon. Do you know people tendency to be helpful when they're in a good mood. That's right. And sometimes it works in the other way around, right? When you do nice things for other people, it puts you in a good mood. So you know what? You're having a hard day, you're having, a tough time, you're hitting an obstacle. My suggestion is stop ruminating. Stop thinking about your own problems and go do something nice for something else. Stop what you're doing and go vacuum the house, clean the kitchen for your mom, put away the dishes, do something nice, do the laundry, and all of a sudden you might feel kind of like a mood elevator. It kind of brings you up out of your funky mood. I like how your book really gets to business. It says, can money buy happiness? It's a question that lots of people probably have pondered. If I had more money, if I won the lotto, would I be happier? According to research, of course, national wealth matters. People in poor countries tend to be less happy than people in wealthier countries. Personal income can predict some level of happiness. If you have enough money to get what you need, to feel in control of your life, to eat, to have a shelter, to treat yourself once in a while, you tend to feel happy. The rising economic tide doesn't produce happier people, but if you have your needs met, it does increase the likelihood of having happiness. And extreme inequality, just take note that extreme inequality could be socially toxic. People in the lower income bracket, they have more health problems and mental health issues. One of the best compliments you can give to someone is that they are resilient. And what is resilience? It's that personal strength that helps people cope with stress and recover from adversity. One thing that colleges often ask, and I know because I do a lot of these Common App forms for students that are going into college, they want to know how you have overcome adversity. And I think that's interesting because what they're really asking is, are you resilient? Is this student resilient? Because you know what? Life is going to hit you. Life has ups and life has downs. And resilience is your ability to overcome, adapt and overcome when adversity hits. And adversity will hit. It hits everyone to some degree. How do you get out of it? How do you overcome it? That's the question. So resilience, it's a beautiful compliment when you tell someone is very resilient. Now, one of the things they often suggest, and this is true across the board for everyone, one of the best stress relieving activities is aerobic exercise. That's right, going to the gym. It increases your heart rate. It also increases lung fitness, and it helps alleviate depression and anxiety. That's right, it helps control those serotonin levels. Remember serotonin? Yes, we like serotonin. I often tell my students that they should have a thankfulness journal or a gratitude journal, because as you're writing, you're focusing on the positive and you're pouring it onto the page. And when you read about it a couple of days later, you'll remember this wonderful thing that happened to you. And it could be something small. Starting a journal, like a gratefulness journal, is a great kind of exercise. It takes you somewhere where you can focus on the positive and you can kind of record it. And you're documenting it. It's fabulous. So in positive psychology, they do talk about gratitude, mindfulness meditation, and also including faith communities. All these things can enhance your well-being. Puppies. I just love puppies. Just enjoy the puppies. Okay, now that we're done talking about stress, we're going to talk about mental disorders and their categories. In this slide, we're not talking about any particular mental disorders, but we're looking at what qualifies someone to have a mental illness. And I think it's really appropriate to look at this little mnemonic, are you mad? Get it? You mad? Are you mad? No? No one thinks that's funny? I love mnemonics. Anyway, you mad is a rule of thumb. When you want to know if something is abnormal or atypical, you plug it into you mad. Is it unjustifiable? If it is, check. Is it maladaptive or harmful to the person? If it is, check. Is it atypical or unusual? Check. And last one, is it disturbing to others? If you checked all 4 of those boxes, guess what? It tends to be that the person is exhibiting something atypical with their behavior or, with their cognition, which in that case, you need to recommend that they go see a professional. And this is my time where I talk about this disclaimer. You might feel like you can diagnose your friends and family, but guess what? You should not. So don't diagnose your friends and family. We're not ready for that. Even after the course is done, trust me. They call this the Bible of mental disorders. It's the DSM-5. It's the APA's Diagnosis and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. All mental disorders are located here. Well, really not all. It's more like Western culture. And then if you want global, then you want to do the ICD-9, which is the International Classification of Diseases. Your book does take a moment to talk about something very serious, and they're talking about suicide, the risk of harm to the self and others. And if a friend or a family member is talking to you about suicide, you can do several things. Of course, it's great to be a good listener and empathize and offer help. But the second thing you should do is connect the person with an adult, a teacher, a school counselor. And you should also call the suicide hotline, the suicide prevention line, which is also seen on this screen. Protect someone who appears to be in immediate risk by seeking fast help. Call 911. Don't leave them alone. Make sure that somebody else is in charge of them when you leave them. Okay, let's talk about the categories of mental illness. We're going to start with anxiety-based disorders. Anxiety-based disorders, well, let's first define anxiety as generalized apprehension with no cause. It's different than fear, although sometimes it feels like fear. Anxiety disorders are a group of disorders characterized by excessive fear. And the first one is GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. The symptoms are heart palpitations, hot flashes, cold sweat, nausea, shortness of breath, and it could range from mild to severe. Panic disorder is another anxiety-based disorder. The symptoms are choking, not able to breathe, you're feeling dizzy and faint. A lot of times people go to the ER thinking they're having a heart event when really they're having a panic attack. Phobic disorders are another anxiety-based disorders. We have specific phobias, which could be an irrational fear of pretty much any object or situation. Agoraphobia is fear of being in a situation where you can't escape. Also, like being out in a crowded place, a large shopping mall, those things, if they bother you, that kind of goes into the realm of agoraphobia. And lastly, social anxiety disorder is the extreme fear of being scrutinized or judged by others. And here are some of America's biggest fears. Now, we're leaving anxiety-based disorders and moving to OCD and related disorders. OCD, a person suffering from this might find themselves thinking the same thoughts over and over again. Those are obsessions. But then they follow through with them and they do them. Those are compulsions, when you act out your thoughts. Some classic OCDs are, repetitive hand washing, over showering, locking and unlocking doors, ritualizing, counting things, equalizing, all classic OCD symptoms. Now, this is an example of an impulse control disorder. It's under the OCD and related category. Impulse control disorders, I like this little pie graph because it gives you a nice little neat place where they're all located. These are all impulse control disorders. You have to know them and know what they mean. This is a quick video of Howie Mandel. He does suffer from OCD, although he's doing very well and he's made some great leaps. This shares his story with you. Okay, we're out of OCD and related disorders, and we're moving on to PTSD, trauma and related disorders. PTSD is short for post-traumatic stress disorder, and it only happens after you've experienced a trauma. You're not born this way, you don't just wake up this way. It's as a result of trauma. What the trauma is really dependent on the individual. A trauma could be something catastrophic like surviving a natural disaster. Military vets often get PTSD because they see things that are unusually horrific, especially during war. Rape victims, these are classic things that happen to people that give them PTSD. Now, if we take all the disorders that we talked about, anxiety-based disorders, OCD, and PTSD, if we try to understand how this happens, there's a number of different, factors at play here. It could be conditioning. You could have learned to react to, things this way, and you almost could copy anxiety. That's one way, conditioning. Another way could be your thoughts, right? The way you interpret stimuli could lead to things that are maladaptive, like anxiety, like OCD, like PTSD. Also, we can't discount your physiology. So that's where the biological perspective comes in. It could be genetic. This could have been passed down from generation to generation. It could be a brain anomaly. There could be an experience that changes the brain circuitry, does something to the amygdala to overreact and glitch. And so you're going to have fight or flight without you wanting fight or flight and without necessity for fight or flight. And that could happen. And that could actually also be passed down genetically too. And then also think of natural selection. Humans are biologically prepared to fear what our ancestors did, like the dark, like snakes, like all kinds of creepy crawlies, right? A 9-month-old baby will fear ancient threats like hisses and thunder more than modern threats like a bomb going off or glass breaking, right? Isn't that interesting? Because those things, remember, epigenetics, have been passed down to us. And really, it helps us survive. Okay, we're jumping out of the PTSD category and moving on to depressive disorders. Now, depressive disorders, talking about depression, what are these sounds? Horrible sound effects. Depressive disorder is a group of disorders characterized by an enduring, sad, empty feeling, an irritable mood, inability to sleep, and also it's accompanied by physical ailments as well. And that's unipolar depression. Major depressive disorder is, you're depressed, but it should be like if someone qualifies for this diagnosis, it's usually 2 or more weeks in the absence of any drug use. So you feel deep depression for 2 or more weeks. It's long lasting. You have diminished interest or pleasure in activities. Sometimes your friends will notice it before you even notice it. You have trouble sleeping. You sleep too little, or you might be sleeping too much. Agitation, fatigue, feelings of worthlessness, diminished ability to think and concentrate, and also having reoccurring thoughts of death. All of these things wrap up into deep clinical depression. And if these things are happening to you, you need to contact someone right away. Your parent, an adult, a teacher, a counselor, and let them know that you're feeling depressed and they should stop and get you help. Remember also that if your friend is suffering from depression and reveals this to you, it's good to speak to an adult about this. It could be your own parent or their parents. They'll thank you later. Now, bipolar disorder is under the mood disorder category. Bipolar disorder, this particular condition, it's when individuals are excessively and inappropriately happy or unhappy, and they can alternate between the two. They have a manic type reaction, which is also referred to as the high or the manic state or mania, or the low is also called the depressive type reaction. There's bipolar 1, which is more severe, than bipolar 2, less severe. Hypomanic or hypomania is an elevated mood, energy, and activity level. that could lead to impulsive and, erratic behavior that might be inappropriate. So after watching some of the videos, I hope you understand bipolar disorder better. Now we're finishing up the mood disorders by talking about a couple more. Seasonal affective disorder is being depressed in the winter and then manic in the summer. Childhood depression is another category completely because they don't present like adults do. They're going to be characterized by physical complaints. Children will complain about shoulder pain and back pain and leg pain and stomach pain and headaches, and therefore, like, your back should not be hurting. You're like a rubber band. Why are you experiencing these physical symptoms? And it might actually be an indicator something else is going on psychologically. Postpartum depression is another kind of depression that happens after you deliver a baby, and it's due to hormonal changes. Introjective depression is characterized by feelings of failure and guilt and inferiority. It's like you're injecting yourself right in the arm with your own guilt and your bad thinking, which leads you to your own depression. And just like we did with the other mental disorders, where do depressive disorders come from? Understanding, how they emerge. And it could be a combination of your behavior and your thoughts. It could be that depression is widespread with women at greater risk. So we're talking about, it might be like a cultural thing. Most major depressive disorders end on their own. People can recover faster with therapy, but there's no saying that you can't get better on your own. And we'll learn this after we talk about therapy, people who go to therapy, they get better faster and they stay better longer. Remember that depression can return. 20% of the condition can be chronic. Stress and negative events also prompt depression, and sometimes it's kind of normal. For example, passing away of a loved one. It's very normal to feel down for a while, weeks and weeks, months and months even. But then you kind of have to turn the page and you got to go on with your life. If you have an inability of being able to pick yourself up, dust yourself off and move on, that's an indicator you might be suffering a clinical condition like depression. So remember that compared with generations past, depression is striking earlier and more often, with the highest rates being among teenagers. And remember that nutrition could also play a role. Heart healthy diets that reduce inflammation help reduce depression. So digestive symptoms like bacterial problems could actually produce serotonin. So keeping a good healthy diet and exercising could help stave off depression. Isn't that good news? You can do something about it. Think about it. Check out the brain scans above me. Look at the depressed brain versus the manic brain. And remember, with depression, brain activity is going to slow down. With bipolar, it's going to increase. Depression is going to lower reward centers, while bipolar increases reward centers, especially in the manic state. Norepinephrine is lowered in the depressed category, and it's scarce. Serotonin is lowered, and SSRIs like Prozac and Zoloft can block the reuptake. The social cognitive perspective of depression is that negative thoughts and negative moods, they interact. If you have and continue the negative thinking, the pessimism, right, the rumination, that's going to lead to a bad attitude and bad behavior. So it all starts up here, and you can control it. Remember that rumination, the definition of that is compulsive fretting and overthinking problems and their causes. Stop ruminating. I know you had a bad day. I I know you have a problem, but your problem's not going to be solved by continually thinking about it and being angry about it. Be proactive. And you know what? And in all cases, right, if it all fails and nothing is working, stop and go do something nice for somebody else. Stop focusing on your problem and go think of somebody else's problem and help them out. You might find a huge change in your mood, and you might even resolve your problem in the meantime. Moving away from mood disorders, and we're jumping into schizophrenia and spectrum disorders. Schizophrenia is literally a problem of the mind. It means split brain, but it doesn't mean split personality, so don't get those confused. It's a psychotic disorder. The difference between neurotic, there's something wrong with you, and psychotic is that you're out of reality. And in this case, with schizophrenia, you are out of reality. So two of the major symptoms of schizophrenia are delusions and hallucinations. Delusions are false beliefs, like you believe that you're an alien from another planet. But hallucinations are like false sensory experiences. You see aliens, they're talking to you. That's a hallucination. But if you believe you're an alien, you're from another planet, that's a delusion. Know the difference. There are positive and there's negative symptoms of schizophrenia. And in this case, here are some of the symptoms up here. I'm showing you now. The two major symptoms are positive and negative, but in this case, positive is not good and negative is bad. Positive is like, it means to add or like active. Negative means inactive or subtracting. So think of it like math. Positive is active, negative is inactive. So positive symptoms are like disorganized word salad, being deluded, inappropriate laughter. A lot of times people with schizophrenia, if it's acute schizophrenia or reactive schizophrenia, they're reacting to a life stressor. They could be 40 years old, they're going to their work, and then all of a sudden they get the breakthrough symptoms of schizophrenia. That's acute schizophrenia with positive symptoms. Negative symptoms are inactivity, so toneless voices, expressionless faces, they go mute or they have rigid bodies. That's a negative symptom of schizophrenia, also more common with chronic schizophrenics. Paranoia is a major symptom of schizophrenia, and paranoia could also come with delusions of grandeur, God complexes, also called megalomania, persecution, and preoccupation with their delusions. Catatonia is the other side of the spectrum. It's a lot of negative symptoms. They can remain motionless for long periods of time. This symptomology is very serious. They have a deterioration in normal movement, loss of speech, loss of communication, and a lot of times catatotics have to be hospitalized. And here's the big question. How does one get schizophrenia? Where does it come from? There's a lot of theories and there's a lot of disagreement. But right now, this is what we know. It could be biochemical, right? It involves dopamine, excess levels of dopamine. It could be brain anatomical, abnormal brain tissue. It could be something in prenatal development during the environment, like of the uterus. And it's also very highly genetic. Most people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia have someone in their family with it. So let's jump out of schizophrenia and talk about dissociative disorders. Dissociative disorders, also known as dissociation, there's like a handful that you have to know. To dissociate, everyone does this. It's like spacing out or daydreaming, right? But it's that taken to the furthest extreme where it becomes a clinical condition. You're not dealing with reality properly, and it's impairing your life function. So these are some dissociative disorders you have to know. Depersonalization disorder, dissociative amnesia, anterograde amnesia, retrograde amnesia, and psychogenic fugue. And The two I'm going to talk about, because the rest, the amnesias, are pretty much self-explanatory. I'm going to talk about fugue really quick. It's pronounced fugue, even though it's not spelled that way. And it's kind of like fight or flight coupled with amnesia. Not only do you forget who you are, but you run away from who you are. And usually what triggers it is a big stressor. Now, the one that gets the most publicity and the most media attention is DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. It used to be called MPD, multiple personality disorder. And that's when a person splits off into different personalities or alters. Okay, so coming out of dissociative disorders, we have personality disorders. And the main one that your book really emphasizes is antisocial personality disorder, and rightfully so. It's the worst one of all the personality disorders. Antisocials are the sociopaths and the psychopaths that you often read about. Some of the signs and symptoms, and there's early warning signs too, like between the ages of 3 and 6, they could be really impulsive. They don't really concern themselves with rewards. It's hard to reward them, and it's also hard to punish them at this young age, and you start seeing signs of it pretty early. Antisocial personality disorder is no joke. It happens and occurs more in men than with women. Again, you have a chart here. That's not decoration. This is to study. These are all the personality disorders that you should be aware of. We covered this in another chapter, but I'm going to repeat it again, that there is another category called feeding and eating disorders. Feeding and eating disorders, this is a group of disorders characterized by altered consumption or absorption of food that impairs health. Usually the feeding disorders happens during infancy and childhood, while eating disorders happens after you can feed yourself. Two of the main eating disorders you should know is anorexia nervosa, which is self-starvation, and bulimia nervosa, which is binge eating and purging. Moving out of the eating disorders, we have neurodevelopmental disorders. Now, neurodevelopmental disorders, they could be a number of different things. It could be a motor disorder, like impairing your ability to communicate, interact, or perform a task. Developmental coordination disorders, similar. You have extreme clumsiness, slowness, trouble with handwriting, trouble like buttoning a button. So that could be something developmental. And of course, there is physical therapy for this. Stereotypic movement disorder is repetitive and unnecessary motor movements like hand rocking, waving, finger flapping, body rocking, and self-biting. Tourette's disorder is repetitive utterances, movements, and that they're completely involuntary, and they can't really control them. Usually you see these tics in the face, but they could be other extremities. I know the one you know the most about is autism spectrum disorder, and it seems like we all know someone or have a loved one with autism, or we know someone with autism. Autism spectrum disorder combines autism and Asperger's, but for the most part, Asperger's has been eliminated from the DSM-5, and now autism spectrum it's on a spectrum. So there's high functioning to low functioning and everything in between. ADHD is our last neurodevelopmental disorder and the last disorder we're talking about in this module. And ADHD is short for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. A person can have attention deficit alone, ADD, or they can have hyperactivity alone. But ADHD in combination together makes it really hard to concentrate. It's controversial because it's hard to differentiate typical kid behavior and atypical kid behavior. But ADHD, I know you've heard of it.